Okay. I am going to give you the greatest gift I could possibly give anyone who has just spent 2 days at an awesome conference like CRAFT. I am going to end 15 minutes early. I have many versions of this talk, and I know that I can get my message across in 45 minutes. So that is my gift to you. Another gift is, if you find that it was an interesting presentation, if you send me some email, which is on this first slide, I will be happy to send you the PowerPoint. There's no copyright on any of these slides, and you can translate it into any language you choose, and you can talk about experiments, small trials, being fast and frugal. So send me some email. I'd be happy to hear from you. Let's take a short survey. How many of you are doing Agile something? Big stretch, yes. Most of you, okay. And we're not going to ask you what flavor. Is it Scrum Butt or XP? Or we're just going to assume that for some reason your organization decided to go Agile. And what I wonder is, okay, that this has already gone beyond you, yeah. That when you made that decision, I don't know whether you made it or whether your management made it, whether a CXO made it, but was that a scientific decision? Whoever made the decision, did they look at all of the randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled experiments that showed clearly that Agile is better than what you were doing before? How many of you looked at those studies? Oh, okay. You did. You looked at those studies? Interesting. And how much beer did you have at the conference? Because the sad answer is there aren't any. Not only are there no scientific studies that show Agile is better than whatever you were doing before, that is the history of our industry. We have a history of going from one buzzword to the next with no science. There are no controlled scientific studies that show any of the paths we have taken along the way in software development have actually made things better. Whoops, okay, all right. What we do have are, and probably what the gentleman in the back is thinking about, we do hear a lot of good stories. In fact, what we know about your brains and about how you make decisions, stories are more convincing than data. Now, I realize I'm in Hungary. I'm talking to the people who live in the country that have won an inordinate number of Nobel Prizes. Let's hear it for Hungary. The latest studies I saw show that you, as a country, read more books per capita than anyone in the world. I think that's an indicator of intelligence. I'm hoping you will save us. You will save us from ourselves, because right now, all we have are good stories. All we have are good stories about how Agile made things so much better. Oh yes, our customers are happy. How do we measure that? Oh yes, our defect rates are lower. How do we measure that? We know that Agile is just, well, common sense. And what we know about common sense is that it has often led us astray in the past, and it will lead us astray in the future. We don't do science. We just tell stories. Well, we use this word, don't we? The word experiment. In fact, that's part of Agile. We talk about experiments all the time. But let me ask you, since I know there's a good scientific community here in Hungary, what is science about experiments? What do we need to do an experiment? Well, we should need an hypothesis. What do we believe in the beginning? And most of the time when Agile development, when we talk about experiments, there is no hypothesis. All we are doing is trying something. We heard a good story about something some other team or some other company is doing, and we said, let's experiment. And what we meant by that was we will try it. We will try this practice and we will see if it makes things better. However, we begin that experiment, really a trial, with no clear hypothesis in mind. We never do randomized assignment. In fact, when we do our little experiments and we involve people in the organization, we ask, who wants to try this new cool stuff? And the people who raise their hands and say, yes, oh, me, I want to try the new cool stuff. Would that make a difference in the results? Do you know what the word placebo means? Placebo means you're taking some drug, an injection, perhaps surgery, that has no efficacy. It's a sham treatment, and yet it's effective in even really good scientific drug trials. Placebos are effective because we believe it. In fact, if we understood just a little more about how placebos work, we might not need so much real medication. It's the power of belief. I have another talk that I often give at Agile conferences. The title is Agile a Placebo? I don't get a request for that talk much anymore. So no hypothesis, no randomization, and of course no control group. If we are really going to do an experiment that looks at a treatment, an evaluation of a process, there should be a control group, should there not? We don't have the funds to run real experiments once, let alone twice, with the treatment of some sort and with a control group. So no control group. And when we're done, there is no real analysis. We just look at one another and we say, we like it, or we don't, trying to remember what it was like to do things the way we did them before. And that, my friends, is not science. And that is also not how to run an experiment. We just heard an awesome UX talk with lots of interesting data. And you might want to raise your hands and say, well, now, Linda, surely the UX folks, they do this stuff called A/B testing. Isn't that real science? And I'm sorry to say, it was an awesome talk, and I thought the results were interesting, but no. There was no hypothesis. There was no development of any kind of theory. It was a collection of, well, this seems to work better than that, without any understanding or any explanation. In fact, our speaker was a little adamant about some of those results, and I wonder how many times those results had been validated and in what kind of environments. That is also not real science. Sorry, UX people. I think we need another word. We know that language is important. So I'm going to suggest that instead of the word experiment, which implies a level of scientific inquiry that we will never be able to provide because of limited resources, we won't be able to have randomized controlled experiments. Let's use the word trial, because really that's what we're doing. We're trying. Let's try it. And there's nothing wrong with that. To use the word trial to mean exactly what we do right now. We are always trying new things, and I applaud that. That's what Agile has brought to the table, is the idea of continuous learning through trials. Agile never said it was scientific. It was never sold as a scientific discipline built on the scientific approach. So let's not delude ourselves, and let's use the best of what Agile has to offer. So let's just say try, which brings to mind a pattern from Fearless Change: trial run. So here are lots of reasons why it's good to do trials, except for this one. Let's try it, and that will prove to those people that this is a good idea. And what we know, that even in real science, even if we were doing real experiments, once and done, one single experiment never proves anything. If it's going to be real science, it not only has to be done with a proper hypothesis, randomization, and good analysis, it should be validated in another environment, which makes me question all of those UX tests. What was the environment like? What if we change the environment? Will that change the results? I'll bet it will. Validation, we've got to repeat it. So really, even real science doesn't prove anything. Science is not about content. Science is about a process, and it's about learning, and it's about throwing away things that are replaced by new ideas. So the idea that we can have some result encased in concrete and praise God forever is false. We should always be tenuous in our decisions. We should be humble in examining the results of our trials, because even with real science, we can never be sure. We know that science are biased, and so that's why the placebo effect works. We know that what the drug trials finally realized is that if they're going to do real science, they have to account for the placebo effect. They not only have to have a test of the real drug, a test of those who get no treatment at all, and then include in it a placebo arm. And only if the real drug exceeds the efficacy of the placebo can we then say this drug is ready for market. And what's astounding about that placebo arm is that more than 60%, that's about two-thirds of the people who get placebo get better. I don't know how many of you work in the drug industry, but it is an increasing problem, because now the results around placebo are especially interesting, that the number of people in the placebo arm that get better is increasing. I don't have an explanation for that, just an observation. So what can you do? Not once and done, not prove anything forever, but what you can do are small, simple, fast, frugal, little tiny trials. And as you do those small, simple, fast, and frugal trials, change things. Change the kinds of people who are involved in it. Change the parts of your organization that participate. Accept ideas from across the organization. Mix it up. Involve everyone is the pattern from Fearless Change. It should be as small as possible, because we know that if there is not a large investment, then we are not so concerned about failure. In fact, I know many organizations that do not like to use the word failure, and that's okay. If that's a word that's not acceptable to your corporate culture, then get rid of it. Just say learn. We're going to do our small, simple, fast, and frugal trial, and no matter what happens, we will learn. We will learn something, and that's why we're doing all of these small, simple, fast, and frugal trials. Make it as small as possible, and keep asking always, can we make it even smaller? If it's so simple, then everyone will feel that they can contribute an idea. I have an idea for a small, simple, fast, and frugal trial. Even my ideas are acceptable. Help each other learn from this experience and encourage ideas from across your organization, and keep asking, can we make it even simpler? I am so sorry that you did not get to meet Rich Sheridan. He was scheduled to be here. He was scheduled to give a workshop. He was scheduled to give a talk. And unfortunately, he had to go home because of a death in the family. He's the CEO of an amazing organization called Menlo Innovations. And in his statement about what we want to do with fast, frugal trials, he says, this is the most common phrase you'll hear at Menlo: let's run the experiment. We probably say that at least once a day, and we don't really keep track of the results, but if we did, I'll bet we would have a lot of failures, but that's not what it's about. It's about learning. I encourage you to go to menloinnovations.com. Read all you can about what I think is the most agile organization on the planet. Again, I'm so sorry you didn't get to meet Rich Sheridan. Why frugal? One of the biases that our brains suffer from is called the sunk cost fallacy. Once we have invested anything, time, energy, money, we are very reluctant to let go of that. I don't know how many times I have been in a meeting with a lot of high-level decision makers, evaluating whether or not a project should be continued. And someone who is close to the project will say, you know, we haven't made any progress. It's been 6 months now. I think perhaps we should cancel it. And someone around the table will say, wait a minute, we've already spent $1 million. We can't cancel it now. Okay, let's give it another 6 months. 6 months later, we're seated around the same table. Someone will say, you know, this project doesn't look any better now than it did 6 months ago, than it did 12 months ago. But someone else at the table will say, well, wait a minute, we've already spent $3 million. We can't cancel it now. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you been in those meetings? Or how about my friend who said, I hate my husband. But we've been married for 35 years. We already have 2 children and 1 grandchild. Well, we can't give up now. I can't divorce him now. I've got too much invested. That is the sunk cost fallacy. Once we have anything invested, we are so reluctant to let that go. So that's why, of all of these attributes of trials, it's especially important that it be frugal. And the translation for frugal, of course, is cheap. It should cost nothing. So therefore, you don't become wedded to a result, thinking if it involves an enormous investment of time, energy, or money, then we're really reluctant. If we were expecting a certain result, we're really reluctant to be open to that. And keep asking, can we make it even cheaper? Don't forget to time box. In Agile, we talk about this often. A favorite quote from Stephen Hovey: begin with the end in mind. Don't let that fast and frugal, small, simple trial run forever because you're hoping for a certain result. Begin with the end in mind and time box it. My example here, let's try having the daily stand-up at 10 a.m. instead of 8 because people are not showing up at 8 o'clock. Let's do a simple trial. Let's have it at 10 and we will see. Our measurement, our metric will be who's attending? Will attendance improve? And we're only going to run this for the next 2 weeks. So why do trials? If you have people in your organization who are resistant, people in your organization who don't like some of the new things that are going on, they're not really Agile fans, they don't really want to move from what they have been doing successfully, probably their entire careers, then prepare to be disappointed. Because what we know about how you make decisions is that you're not convinced by data, nor are other people. So all of the little trials that you might run across your organization are not the way to bring in others, are not the way to show them Agile is a better way. And in fact, if you start collecting data and if you start amassing a lot of information, thinking that you're going to convince people of something thereby, what you're going to find is they become even more convinced that they were right in the first place. That's called the backfire effect. This tendency that we have to hang on to our beliefs is called the confirmation bias, and we all have it. So don't think that trials are a way to overcome resistance. It's better to involve them. Bring them in. Let them try experiments. Oh, you're wondering about certain aspects, certain principles, certain values, certain practices of Agile. Let's try it out. Let's make it a little trial, a little experiment. And we want you to help us. We want you to be involved. We want you to try things in your area. And we want to hear from you about your ideas for small, simple, fast, and frugal trials. That's the most influential thing you can do, is bring people in and make them a part of it and listen to their ideas and what suggestions they might have that would make it better. To solve a problem using a trial, probably not. What we know about you and we know about your organization is you are what's called a complex adaptive system. There's an enormous amount of real theory around complex adaptive systems. And what it shows clearly is that given problems, the only way forward is, well, it's what I'm talking about right now. Small, simple, fast, frugal, little experiments. Do it. And then watch what happens. You cannot plan it. You don't know what the organization is going to do in response to these small trials. Your only way forward is tiny steps. I feel like I've heard that a lot, especially today. The only way forward is by taking little steps and learning after each one. And my message is those little steps should be experiments. It's called probing, sensing, responding. There is no answer. And in fact, this process never ends. You never get there. I don't know how many organizations I've talked to that wanted to go through an agile transformation saying, we all want to be agile by next June. To that, I say, nonsense. Your entire organization will never all be in the same place at the same time. Some of you are way out in front and will be learning things, and that's good. You can help the rest of us. Others lag behind, and that's also good. We can learn, and we don't want to throw away everything that we've done successfully in the past. There is a role for all of those responders to change. We don't know what we don't know. I'm not a fan of Donald Rumsfeld, but I do like that comment. So there's risk involved. We don't know what will happen. If it's really a trial, it's really an experiment. In fact, we should be prepared to be surprised. This is Alexander Fleming. Now, I realize I'm talking to people who live in a city where the home of Ignaz Semmelweis is just across the river. Do you know your own history? Do you know who Ignaz Semmelweis is? Okay, good for you. So he was ignored largely during his lifetime and died in an insane asylum. So that's what you get for doing experiments. This is Alexander Fleming, who didn't set out to discover the amazing drug that it was eventually associated with his name. No, he was just messy. And when he left on vacation, he came back after a couple of weeks and he looked at all of the dishes where he had been growing various cultures and he said, this is funny. I wonder what happened here. I didn't do a good job of cleaning this Petri dish. And now what I see is that it looks like this culture stopped growing for some reason. And when he identified the source of that stoppage, it turned out that he had uncovered an amazing drug that would actually turn medicine on its head, and not until 10 years later. What was the drug? Penicillin. Did he plan it? No. He was just messy. Another of my favorite agile organizations is SIPGate, which is in Dusseldorf, Germany. They have a practice called Open Friday, where they let people do experiments. And out of those experiments come an enormous number of innovative practices that they had never planned on instituting. And so my favorite quote from Karina in a paper that she wrote for the Agile conference was, and we weren't even trying for that. So you don't know what kind of results you're going to get, and you can't plan for it, so you should plan to be surprised. Now, this is a good one. Not that management are always logical, but they're actually pretty smart people, and they love data. So if you're trying to convince management of anything, if you can show the results of some small and simple, fast and frugal trials, they will pay attention. The problem is most of you are techies, you're developers, and you don't always know how to talk to management. So remember, you're going to ask for these slides. I'm not going to read this to you, but here's a lot of suggestions that will help you do a better job of presenting the results of all those fast and frugal, small and simple trials so that you can be influential with your managers. We know that if you do this practice, if it becomes part of the way you think in your organization, well, you get a lot of other side benefits, and I love this one. It's from the Vice President of Product Development of Shutterstock. He said, you kill off the hippos. So the hippo is the highest paid person's opinion. Normally, that's influential in any meeting, and we back down, and we don't get to do the things that we like to do because the hippo in the room says, I'm not sure this is a good idea. And now at Shutterstock and at many other organizations, what we say is, let's just test it. Wait. Let's not have an endless discussion that goes on for hours about whether this is a good idea or not. Let's just run some small, simple, fast and frugal trial, whether it's an idea from the CXO or an idea from the janitor. Let's try it. Let's see what happens, and let's prepare to be surprised. Now, there's a danger in doing experiments. It's the most severe problem that we have with science, is that we look at results and we get carried away. In fact, I see that often in the Agile community. They do a limited trial and they get carried away and they think, look, we can draw incredible conclusions by doing this experiment. So this is a report of a very well-run, real scientific experiment that was done on men in Honolulu. In fact, it was a longitudinal study. It was run for years. And what they noticed was those men who drank a lot of coffee. How many of you are coffee drinkers? You'll love this. Those who drank a lot of coffee were protected, it seems, from Parkinson's disease and a lot of other neurological disorders. So immediately, the general press got a hold of this result. And what came out in all of the newspapers was drinking coffee protects against Parkinson's, because that's what the data seem to suggest. This is a well-run, a scientific study. The problem is the results as presented are not true. Now, my family suffers not from Parkinson's, but from a related neurological disease. My father had it. I have it. My daughter has it. My brothers have it. And none of us drink coffee. So it's not that drinking coffee protects you. It's that if you carry the gene for these neurological disorders, you don't like coffee. Do you see the danger? I sense that a lot today. That all of a sudden we were noticing things that seemed to go together, and we were drawing conclusions that were exactly like this. When I say, no, you might be entirely wrong. Even if your data are wonderful and you've done something that is real science, you have to be careful. Just because things line up, that doesn't mean that you've uncovered the key to anything. You've just noticed a couple of things that happen to go together. Correlation is not causation. It's a real danger. So I'm going to suggest to you that in future, you adopt this practice. And instead of having enormous discussions at meetings and wasting an incredible amount of time deciding whether something is the path you want to tread, just say, well, why don't we try it? Why don't we run a little, small, simple, fast and frugal trial, and we will see what happens. Is it real science? No. But it's as close as we're going to get. And it will help us in so many ways. One of the primary benefits is you will get in the habit of thinking this way. Your organization will get into the habit of thinking this way. And out of that will come a culture shift. If people ask me, because I have written 2 books on organizational change, how do you change organizational culture? This is the answer. I'm giving you the answer. Small, simple, fast, and frugal trials. Just try it. Just try it. Just try it. And now everyone begins to say, instead of wasting an enormous amount of time discussing this, let's just try it. It's an enormous shift in an organization, and what you get is a culture of experimentation and a culture of learning, and that is what Agile is all about. It's not about the daily stand-up. It's not about pair programming. It's about learning, and it's about learning in small steps. It's about being open to change. It's about being open to trying things. That's why what your organization does is not going to be what the organization down the road does. And what you're going to do today is not what you're going to do next year. In fact, if you're still doing what you did a year ago, then you're not Agile. Sorry. So here's a list of, I know, but this is Hungary. They still read books here. I'm so happy. I get a lot of pushback. I get a lot of pushback, especially these days, because financial institutions are going Agile. And the comment is, well, Linda, these all sound really nice, but we're a bank. We can't just run in and change things. We've got government regulations. We have a long history of doing things a certain way. And to that, I say nonsense. The first link on this page is to the Behavioral Insights team. And they began with a large organization doing small, simple, fast, and frugal trials. And that organization was the British government. Now, I don't care what kind of constraints your organization faces, it cannot compare to the constraints of the British government. And it was so successful that now governments around the world are enlisting their own behavioral insights team. The United States was slow, but finally we got on board. Of course, that was when we had a president that knew how to think. So if governments can do it, you can do it. There's now enough small, simple, fast, and frugal experimentation going on that I point you now to another website where they're collecting ideas for experiments, results from experiments, not with the idea that you should go there and say, oh, well, if it worked for them, it will work for us. No, if it worked for them, you should try it. If it worked for them, that will give you an idea of some small, simple, fast, and frugal experiment that you can carry out. And then finally, one of my favorites, a charity I support. I don't know over my lifetime how much money I have given away to help people in various situations who need it. And I've always wondered, was that the best use of my money? We assume that it is, but we have no proof. So now IPA is an organization that does support charities, but only if they have done an experiment. Only if they've been able to show scientifically that the money that you contribute is really going to help. There are lots of other ideas for doing experiments. I'm just going to point you to continuous retrospectives. Just Google on that. I have a whole talk on it. Andre's guide board. How do you collect ideas for small, simple, fast, and frugal experiments? And that you might think about a process where once a week you get together and you talk about ideas and report on how your small, simple, fast, and frugal experiments are going to work. But that's just a beginning. You're going to do your own process. You're going to develop your own way of trying to introduce this into your organization. So that's my experiment there, is just try it. Run your own experiments. It's actually fun. So am I good? Yeah. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
And
Okay, you can leave now. You can all go home.
Well, as you promised, you left a lot of time for questions, so would you like to address some of those?
I will. I'll be happy. So,
Okay.
Okay. How would you then qualify all these people publishing ways of In the olden days, and as you can see, I'm incredibly old, so I can speak about the old days. The conferences, the papers, the books were very different. I think there's been a shift. Some of it has been good, some of it maybe not so good. And that we have an entire industry of people who write books, who write articles, who give talks. And the presentation is usually about my experience and what I have seen with no science. It makes me a little uneasy to see that. Would you consider, making a little bit of money also incentive to not let, what? Oh, a float. I'm not sure I understand that. Oh, okay, so this is sort of the opposite of the sunk cost fallacy. So instead of investing money, you're going to make money. Yeah, that's absolutely, any kind of incentive. I have a whole talk on incentives. You can Google on that one. We know incentives definitely affect you. If you're being paid, or if you're going to be getting extra money or extra recognition or any extra thing, that definitely has an impact on what you believe. So, yeah, indeed. Why isn't there a study like that? Like what? I don't know why.
Next
Would
one.
you say small trial, this is good, is the reason UK is not in EU? Oh man, that's a good question. I don't think you want me to answer that because we're just having an enormous controversy. In fact, I killed my Facebook page. I heard about Cambridge Analytica 2 years ago, and I thought, okay, Mark Zuckerberg, he knew about Cambridge Analytica long before that. So think about it. When you use Facebook, does it cost you anything? It's free, isn't it? That should make you suspicious. This is free. So then the question is, what are you giving in return for that? Because you're paying a lot for that. Now, it used to be that we could say, oh, they're collecting data, they don't really know what to do with all of it. That's true at that time, but now they do. They know exactly what to do with that data. And they know probably more about you than you know about yourself. It's frightening. So maybe the answer is yes. What do you suggest to software companies about doing small, simple, fast, and frugal? Yeah. Okay. Are you friends with Jeff Sutherland? Absolutely. I saw him on an elevator in Minneapolis just recently. There was a big snowstorm, and we both just barely made it to the global Scrum gathering. So yeah, I have known Jeff Sutherland since the early 90s. So yes.
Should we just delete them?
What is your definition of happiness? And this is too philosophical. So I'm very happy. And so I think a lot of it has to do with luck. I had parents who cared about me. I had teachers who cared about me. I'm lucky enough to have a husband who loves me. And that you will sit here and listen to me. Who would not be happy? Thank you for that. Okay. Good night.